recording. Okay, and then now I'm speaking with Patty Macke on July 10th. And so, Patty, let me ask you, where and when were you born?
I was born in Union Hospital in Terre Haute, Indiana, April 8th, 1946.
Okay. And who were your parents?
Robert and Una Boyer.
And you have brothers or sisters?
2 brothers, Alan and Victor.
Okay. And tell us about where you lived when you were growing up.
I spent my whole time growing up on Zion Road, the first house east of the Zion Church.
Okay. How would you describe the neighborhood?
Everybody was a farmer. We had several close neighbors that we could ride our bikes or walk to their houses. And that was always a big treat to get to do that, because we didn't do it just every day, but just maybe once a week. I don't think we ever did that more than once a week.
Who were some of the neighbors you remembered spending time with?
Well, our closest neighbors were the Millers. That would be Joyce and Gary and Morris. And we were all 3 about the same ages. In fact, Morris and I were in the same class. And then the other direction from us were Tommy and Danny and Albert Werns. And a little further away were Donnie and Jackie Davidson. And they had horses, so it was always a treat when they rode their horses to our house.
I was thinking as I was coming over today, there weren't a lot of girls in the neighborhood.
They weren't. I think your sister Joyce and I were maybe the only ones I can think of.
Okay. How would you describe the neighborhood now? How has it changed?
Well, still a lot of farmers. When I visit Mother on Zion Road, I see many, many grain trucks go by and lots of farm equipment go by. So still a farming community, and I guess in appearance it's somewhat different. Several houses have been torn down, several new ones have been built on that road. But pretty much the same.
Okay, well, let's talk about your childhood. How did you spend your time? What did you like to do?
I liked to sit on our back porch, which was covered. It was actually a porch that connected the house and the summer kitchen. And we had an old school desk on that porch. I loved to sit in that desk and pretend I was a secretary. And I liked to jump rope. I liked to play jacks. We didn't have a television until I think perhaps I was in the 4th grade. So pretty much had to entertain ourselves. It was always a big treat when a magazine came in the mail. I loved to look at magazines and to read.
Did you have hobbies?
Well, I did a little bit of, I was learning to sew. I did some embroidery work. We always had kittens, and we liked to play with our kittens. We had just one puppy, I remember, and we were so fond of the puppy. His name was Poncho. Our parents warned us, do not play near the road with Poncho, but one day we were near the road, and sure enough, Poncho ran out into the road, and Harry tamely ran over him and killed him. And we were so devastated, and Harry stopped and was so upset that this had happened. And of course, my folks just said, we told you not to do that, and I think we did not get another puppy.
Let's talk about family life. What family activities do you remember?
Well, I mostly remember Daddy getting up early every day and working late at night, and we were always hoping to get to go someplace but seldom got to. It seems like my parents worked very hard. Mother made all of my clothes and a lot of my brother's shirts. She had a big garden. She canned, of course, washing and ironing, and my parents just seemed to be very busy all the time. But occasionally well, quite infrequently actually, but we did go to a few movies in Marshall at the Marshall Theater, and it was always a special treat to get to go to the county fair. And I'm sure, well, it seems like every Sunday afternoon we would go visit my Grandma Ferris. My other grandma had moved to Chicago because her daughters had gone to Wheaton College, and when they did that, she moved to Wheaton, bought a house, and rented rooms out to college students, and she also cooked for them. And so when she came to Marshall for a visit, it was a huge treat because she would tell us stories. She was a great storyteller, and she would tell about what it was like when she was growing up. And that was very interesting. I think she may have embellished somewhat, but it was always fun for her to come and be with us.
Let's talk about school. Where did you go to school?
I did not go to kindergarten because when I was that age, kindergarten was held in the summer, and it was the parents' responsibility to take them to school, and my folks thought they did not have time. So my first year of school, and the first time I was really away from my mother, was first grade in the Ohio school building, which is now the school district's central office. And my teacher there was Mrs. Smith. And then in second grade I went to North School, and I went to North School through sixth grade, except fifth grade I went to South School. I'm not sure why, but so I did go to both elementary schools, and I can still see the school building sitting where it was and where the sidewalks were, and we played under the trees, and it was just a pleasant time. And probably my favorite thing was by this time my grandmother had moved back to Marshall from Wheaton and lived near the school, and every Thursday she had my brothers and me come to her house for lunch, and she fried hamburgers in an iron skillet, and I can still in fact I have the picture that she served our milk in, and that was just a fun time. Which this tells us something about how times have changed. We just on Thursdays walked over there. Today at school that would never happen. You would need a note from your parent and
To
definite
say that you would
permission.
walk someplace.
Yes, saying that you could leave the school ground.
Okay. Let's talk about high school. Where did you go to high school?
I went to Marshall High School.
What are some of your memories of things you were involved with in high school?
Let's see. I was in Latin Club. I was in Girls Chorus. I was Marshallette. I belonged to several organizations, and those are the ones I remember. Well, I was homecoming queen, and that was very special. And I was valedictorian of my high school class, and the year before my brother had been valedictorian, so that was a special thing. I was in National Honor Society, and it was my brother, who was just a year older, who brought the pin to the room when I was pinned for that. I remember ball games. And again, I didn't get to go to too many, so it was very exciting when I did. And I remember my friends. Some of them are still around Marshall and are still my friends. And a few who have moved away, I've remained friends with.
And then you went to college right after high school?
I worked 1 year for Elmer Schaller, and then I started to ISU, and after a year there, I got married. And several years after that, I went back to school and finished my college education.
Okay. And how did you meet your husband?
John was from West Union and also went to Marshall High School. I did not date him in high school, but after high school, one day he called and asked me out, and that was it.
And then, when did you get married?
We got married in January of 1966.
Okay. And where did you live then?
Well, he had one more year of college, so we moved right after our wedding. We moved to Champaign, and he finished school, and I worked at the university as a secretary in the administration building. And then, unfortunately, it was during the Vietnam War, and so shortly after he graduated, he was drafted. Although, instead of going to the Army, he opted to go to the Air Force. So while he was in Texas for basic training, I moved back home with my parents.
Okay.
And then after basic training, he was luckily assigned to Chanute Air Force Base. We moved back to Champaign, and I had the same job with the same people that I worked for when he was finishing school. And then he wasn't intending to re-enlist, so he opted for an early out, which he got, and so he was in the Air Force approximately 2 years. And when that time was up, we moved to St. Charles, Illinois, where his job was, and I finished school at Northern Illinois University in DeKalb.
And so how long were you in St. Charles?
We lived there from maybe 4 years, and then we moved to DeKalb, Illinois, which was better for John's job, and we were there a few years. And then we were having our first child and thought we wanted to be closer to our parents so that our children would know their grandparents. So John started working in Paris, Illinois. And then shortly afterwards, our first child was born.
Okay. And so you finished your college degree. Did you begin working there?
Yes, as soon as I graduated, I taught in St. Charles, Illinois for several years.
And what did you teach?
I taught first grade.
Okay.
And when we moved to DeKalb, I commuted to St. Charles and continued to teach. However, when we moved to Paris, since I was expecting, I didn't pursue a job.
Okay.
And I didn't go back to teaching until my children were, in the 4th and 6th grades.
Okay.
I had a very long maternity leave.
Okay, so you had another child then?
Yes, and we had a son in 1976 and a daughter in 1978.
Okay. Okay. And so how long did you teach then when you began?
Well, when
mean here in Marshall.
in Marshall, I taught when I retired, I was close to 30 years of having taught, so
Wow.
more than around 20 in Marshall, I guess. I'm not sure.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some things about the history in general. Was there a particular person that you remember, a particular event that happened that had a major influence on your life?
Now, are we talking about people I personally know?
Yes.
Well, like as someone else was saying, our neighbors, and we, of course, when I was growing up, we lived very close to the church, and that was a very big part of our lives and our social life. It was always so much fun to go to the parties at church. And people I remember there were Virgie Metzger, who had wonderful ideas for fun parties at the church. I remember Marie Fraker was the musical person there. Bob and Vivian Maurer, our neighbors, were, I would say, a good influence on us. They were very lovely people. And just remember a lot of people at Zion Church were influential. And
Okay. Well, let's talk more generally then about things that have happened in history during your lifetime. What historical events most stand out in your mind?
well, probably landing on the moon was one of the big ones, and well, I remember it was a huge deal when President Nixon got into a lot of trouble. I shouldn't be chuckling about that, but that stands out in my mind. I know I was teaching school in St. Charles at the time, I remember. I think landing on the moon was probably the most.
Okay. Let me ask you then, as you think about, growing up at first in a house with no running water, and then all the inventions and things that have been developed, what modern conveniences most affect your life, do you think?
Well, actually, I have to think about my career, and I think the invention I liked the most was the copy machine, which was such an improvement over making dittos, which this sounds a little silly, but it really, really, really simplified things and made things easier from a practical standpoint. I'm sure there's many others.
Well, I have one last question, Patty. If you were talking to somebody who wasn't from here, how would you describe Marshall and tell them why you live here?
Well, after being in places where my children have lived, such as Chicago and Boston, which I love, but it's so difficult to get from one place to another. It's just sort of a major event almost, and I enjoy being here, and where it's easy to get every place, and where I live right now I can walk to church, to the post office, to the library, which is wonderful. So very easy to get around, and it's nice when you leave the house to know you're going to see somebody you know and can chat with and say hello to, friendly faces. I think Marshall is a very friendly town where people look out for one another and help people in need.
Well, thank you, Patty. That'll be